There was a blind cowboy, and he wandered into an all-girl biker bar by mistake. Well, he found his way to the bar stool and ordered some coffee. Well, after sitting there for a while, he yells to the waiter, "Hey, you want to hear a blonde joke?" Well, the bar immediately falls absolutely silent. In a deep and very husky voice, the woman next to him says, "Before you tell that joke, cowboy, I think it's only fair that you're blind and you should know 5 things. The bartender's a blonde girl with a baseball bat. Bouncer, she's a blonde girl. Well, I'm 6 foot tall, 175-pound blonde woman. I've got myself a black belt in karate. The woman sitting next to me, well, she's a blonde and a professional weightlifter. And the lady to your right, well, she's a blonde and a professional wrestler. Now, think about it seriously, mister. You really want to tell that blonde joke?" Well, the blind cowboy thinks for a second, shakes his head, and then says, "No, not if I'm going to have to explain it 5 times. Well, there was an old man who went in for a full checkup. Well, the doc gave the guy a jar and says, "I want you to take this jar home and bring me back a semen sample tomorrow." Well, the next day, the old man reappeared at the doc's office and gave him the jar, which was just as clean and empty as it was on the previous day. Doc says, "Well, what happened?" "Well, Doc, it's like this. First, I tried to do it with my right hand, but nothing. Then I tried with my left hand, still nothing. Well, I asked my wife for help. Well, she tried to get it going with her right hand. Well, then with her left, still nothing. Well, she tried with her mouth, and first with her teeth in, then with her teeth out, still nothing. We even called up the lady next door. Well, she tried too. First with her hands, then with an armpit. She even tried squeezing it between her knees. Still couldn't get it going." The doc, who was pretty shocked, says, You asked your neighbor for help?" Old man says, "Yeah. None of us could get the jar open." There was a nun standing outside of a bar, and a man comes round the corner planning to grab an after-work drink. Well, the nun immediately points at him and says, "Before you enter this den of sin, think about your mother and father." The man wipes away a tear and says, "I'm afraid they've passed. God bless 'em, they're in heaven." "Well," says the nun, "well, think of the damage it'll do to your brain." "What are you talking about?" the guy says. "Have you ever even had a drink?" Well, the nun says, "No." "Well, how can you talk to me about alcohol if you've never had it? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll buy you a drink, and after you drunk it, then you can talk to me about alcohol. What do you have?" "Well, I don't know," says the nun. "What do ladies usually drink?" Guy says, "Ladies seem to like gin." "All right," she says, "but can you have 'em put it in a plastic cup so nobody knows?" Well, the man nods and walks into the bar, calling out to the bartender, "Hey, bartender, I'll have a beer and a double gin in a cup." "Is that none outside again?" They were a couple of fellows from Texas, and they were sitting at a bar when a young lady nearby started to choke on a hamburger. Well, she gasped and gagged, and one of the Texans turned to the other and says, "That little gal over there's having a bad time. I'm going to go over there and help." So he ran over to the young lady and held both sides of her head in his big Texan hands and said, "Can you swallow?" She shook her head no. He said, "Well, can you breathe?" Still gasping, she shook her head no. Well, with that, he bent down and gave her a big old smooch right on her backside. Well, the young woman was so shocked that she coughed up the piece of hamburger and began to breathe on her own. Well, the Texan sat back down with his friend and said, "It sure is amazing how that old hind lick maneuver works every time." Well, there was a lady who was at home alone when she hears somebody knock at the door. Well, she goes to the door, opens it, and sees a man standing there. He looks at her and says, "Ma'am, do you have a vagina?" Well, she slams the door in disgust. The next morning, she hears a knock at the door, and it's the same man. He asks the same question. "Ma'am, do you have a vagina?" Well, she slams the door again. Later that night, when her husband gets home, she tells him what happened the last 2 days. Husband tells the wife in a loving and concerning voice, "Honey, I'm taking tomorrow off to be home just in case that guy shows up again." Well, the next morning they hear a knock and both of them run for the door. Husband says to the wife in a whispered voice, "Honey, I'm going to hide behind the door and listen. And if it's that same guy, I want you to answer yes to the question because I want to see where he's going with this." Well, she nods yes to her husband and opens the door. Sure enough, same guy is standing there. He says, "Ma'am, do you have a vagina?" She says, "Yes, actually I do have one." The man says, "Good. Do you mind telling your husband to go ahead and leave my wife's alone and start using yours?" Well, there was an old lady who walked into a bank, and one of the employees asked her how she could help. Old lady says, "I'm here to open an account. I want to deposit all this money into the bank." "Whoa, that's a lot of money," they said. "You got to talk to a manager." Well, the employee escorts her to the manager's office, tells the manager everything, and leaves. Manager says, "Well, we'll deposit your money. How much is it anyways?" She says it's $1,000,000. Manager says, "Wow, I just want to understand one thing. How would an old lady like you manage to make so much?" She says, "Well, I like betting on random things with people. Like to gamble." Manager says, "Well, you managed to make $1,000,000 gambling? You think you'd play one bet with me?" Old lady says, "Sure. Just seeing ya, I can bet 100 grand that your nuts are cubical, shaped like cubes." Manager says, "What? That's insane. I know they're round. You really want to put your money on such a stupid bet?" Old lady says, "You want to play the bet or not?" "All right, you're on." Old lady says, "All right, but just to make sure you don't cheat, I'm going to do it tomorrow morning in front of a witness." "No problem," manager says. Well, the next day, lady comes with a man who's meant to be the witness. Old lady says, "Are you ready?" Manager says, "Yep, absolutely." So the manager goes ahead and drops his pants and says, "See? It's all round. Nothing's cubical." She says, "It's not very clear from here. I can't quite see. Can I check 'em? After all, 100 grand's at stake." Manager says, "Sure, go ahead, check all you want." So the lady walks up to the manager and checks his nuts to make sure. Well, meanwhile, the witnesses that she brought starts banging his head on the wall. Manager says, "What's wrong with you, buddy?" Witness says, "This old lady bet me 500 grand yesterday she'd walk in here and have the bank manager's nuts in her hand by 9 a.m. Hello, friends. Eddie here. Which one of these jokes was your favorite? Let me know down below. Thanks.